Advanced TV Herstory, the podcast that brings you fresh perspective on the importance of TV in our lives. We tell stories of leadership, persistence, and achievement of TV women, because in the lives of women, no other media platform has influenced or inspired so many. Lo, these 60 years. Women of all ages have been impacted by what they've seen and will see on TV. So join us for a little Advanced TV Herstory by streaming it directly on our website, tvherstory.com, or anywhere you find podcasts. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams. Hello, loyal listeners. I've returned from a fantastic experience that very much fits into the conversation we have here at Advanced TV Herstory. I attended the Athena Film Festival in late February as a bronze level sponsor. There are just so many good things going on with this important gathering of filmmakers that I thought it would be a good place for this podcast to be. Now, you might ask yourself, why would a podcast about TV women sponsor a film festival? Because this event, my friends, put on by the Barnard College Athena Center for Leadership at Barnard College in New York City, annually features the work of women filmmakers, women directors, or films about women. All too often, the talented folks who pour their souls into making this art get passed up by other festivals for all the political and competitive reasons that we know well. Women-centric work sometimes longs for recognition in other media and industries as well. Yet, while hundreds of films apply to be screened at Athena, only a few dozen make the cut. Those that do really are excellent. They are transformative. And those that don't, those folks still understand that this is a festival that serves as a gateway and a networking bridge to others, particularly women, who share the passion for filmmaking. I came to learn about the Athena Film Festival through one of its founders, Melissa Silverstein. Melissa is a phenom, a powerhouse, a source of energy and push, connections, and progress. She and her organization, Women and Hollywood, just celebrated 10 years, a decade of educating and advocating and agitating on behalf of women in the entertainment industry. So you may recall that there's an interview episode that I did with Melissa. It's entitled 10 Years of Women in Hollywood. I interviewed her about what inspired her to found an organization that takes on, for its daily work, the most frontline issues of the women's movement, and that extra layer that comes through media exposure. The point of representation that what we see on TV or on the big screen or hear on the radio really has an exponential power. So they take on representation in the media, pay equity, box office tracking, the Bechdel test, and hashtag Oscar so white, hashtag Grammy so male, and all the hashtag movements which are building to real progress. Melissa's answer? She's a feminist. She's always enjoyed seeing women characters on TV and in film, and I can assure you that she explains all of this in greater depth in that episode in a way that's both eloquent and candid. I encourage you to listen to our 10 Years of Women in Hollywood episode. Silverstein and Women in Hollywood are on the front lines, which makes her an ambassador, a statistics expert, an analyst, and a pundit. And it also makes her an educator, which gets us to the film festival. As you well know, film festivals are a blend of networking and interdisciplinary conference-style conversation. And they're a community in and of themselves. And of course, there's screening films. So there's just so much to do in any given day. Film festivals also have all sorts of thresholds of requirements for submissions. But this one has established itself as one of the foremost events that promotes women and films about women from throughout the world. And that was one of the particular feasts that we had, was really getting to be exposed to work that had taken place on multiple continents. Because, yes, it's amazing that regardless of the continent on which a film about women may have been filmed or edited or funded, There are such incredibly common basic themes of voice, feminism, creativity, and storytelling, and they just run through every single viewing. They exist in the script, in the scenes presented to the audience, and they certainly arise in the conversations and questions and answer sessions that take place after the screenings. So this year's Athena Film Festival brought together fantastic work in film, much of it done by women or about women-centric topics, not traditionally recognized by the film industry. It's a place where newbies really do get to rub shoulders with established producers and directors, as well as highly networked feminists, students, funders interested in furthering this kind of messaging, and yes, podcasters. After a few exhausting days of screening films, listening to panels, and schmoozing at wildly diverse reception gatherings, I knew my sponsorship was making a difference. Whether intentionally or inadvertently, more than once, attendees heard the message that media silos need to be broken down in order for there to be real synergy and understanding. Podcasting, TV, film. Podcasting, TV, film. Seriously, think about all the ways we can and should celebrate the work of women and tell their stories. I'll tell you a few that I experienced at Athena. There's the documentary about Silver Screen Great. It's entitled, and you can see it screening in spring of this year in cities across the country, Bombshell, the Hedy Lamarr story. This is a terrific, eye-opening documentary that was released in 2018 about actress Hedy Lamarr, who is an icon from Hollywood's golden age. While she is regarded even today as an actress, one of many who emigrated from Europe during the Nazi rise to power, her hallmark was her tremendous beauty. But her story went much deeper than that. She ultimately had the mind of a physicist, and this is the story that is told in the documentary. The mind of a physicist, of an engineer, and in fact, during World War II, she earned a patent for the technological theory upon which Wi-Fi and secure radio transmissions is premised. And she was an inventor and an innovator. I mean, in fact, this beautiful woman discussed facial incision placement with her plastic surgeon as she was in the forerunning pioneers of having plastic surgery. And through the suggestions she made and worked with, the plastic surgeon was able to do on her, and ultimately for millions of other women, created fewer and more hidden scars. Hedy Lamarr, the intellectual star, was never allowed to rise for all sorts of reasons. As you might expect, sexism and ageism, to name a few. And throw in a World War II suspicion of immigrants, and you have the story of an amazingly intelligent mind that was never allowed to think expansively, like we allow male inventors to do, male futurists, physicists, and engineers. So instead, Hedy Lamarr lived out her years, and that's another part of this documentary, of what kind of obscurity and what kind of self-esteem diminishes because we don't allow women to be all that they can be. Now, similarly, there was another tremendous screening, and it was Mariska Hargitay and her I Am Evidence documentary. And this was a very powerful afternoon. Friends and loyal listeners, anyone who has turned on a TV in the last 19 years has seen Mariska Hargitay create and grow as the tenacious crime fighter Sergeant Olivia Benson on Law & Order's SVU. And we've seen it in syndication nearly every single year since it came on board in the early 2000s. I'm sorry, in 1999. What am I talking about? Viewers, though, perhaps also know that Mariska Hargitay started a nonprofit organization called the Joyful Heart Foundation, and it works with advocates of survivors of sexual assault. So the core work that emerged out of SVU. That work has taken on the important challenge that city and county law enforcement bureaus across the country, as you may have seen headlines, that there is in fact a backlog of rape kits that have been collected as evidence in crimes over the years, but have never been tested. And it has taken Hargitay's tenacity and her visibility and her voice to raise not only awareness, but also to seek on a state-by-state, city-by-city campaign to end the backlog. Hashtag end the backlog. So Hargitay appeared at the screening, which was the premiere of her documentary, I Am Evidence, and she answered questions, and she just generally showed her real personality, this person who, before she was an actress, was a woman and is a woman. And so the person we saw was not the restrained and reserved Olivia Benson, who we all know and love and hugely respect, but in fact, Hargitay is passionate about this cause and similarly worthy of all of our respect in the world. Here is a performer who initially took on, with no training or notice, this immense outpour of connection that she talks about. Connection, letters, deeply emotional, moving stories of the survivors of sexual assault. And they wrote to her in droves, even as the show was just getting started back in the first couple seasons. And this series has now been going on for 19 years. And so from all of that initial exposure to all of these stories, she tried to figure out how to channel that initial sense of helplessness. And it's with that she created the Joyful Heart Foundation. And from that foundation and all of the good work that comes when people who share a passion get together, came this documentary as well. And this documentary really does go to the whole issue of ending the backlog and the tragedy that happens, that has gone on as those evidence kits sat untended, and to some degree in very poor conditions, even to maintain and preserve them as credible evidence. It's a fascinating, fascinating documentary, I Am Evidence, and please, if you get a chance to see it, do. Podcasting, TV, film, there's no question we are stronger when silos are broken down and ideas can transform across media. And this was an important conversation, not only that I'm having with you, but in the last session, about which I'll share my thoughts. And it was a great one called Changing the Canon. It was a conversation that took place across media perspectives, the people who sat on the panel, one representing digital media, one academic, another film, and another stage. They discussed the importance of audience engagement and framing the storytelling and valuing when it's all told from a woman's perspective or from a woman's keyboard. Now, okay, changing the canon. In this case, the canon is CANON, which is defined as a general law, rule, principle, or criterion by which something is judged. And far too often in all realms of art and authorship of almost anything, of production, we still definitely recognize as an American society, and in fact throughout the world, that the canon, when it's written by a man, holds more value, holds more legitimacy. And this was a lot of the conversation that took place. So these 5 thinkers who were on the panel drew upon decades of experience in their areas, as well as an impressive number of advanced degrees. This is a very learned group of people. It was moderated by Michelle Mater, who is a producer and writer and arts administrator and a distribution and marketing specialist. And she moderated these 4 folks. Montre Aza Missouri, who's a professor at Howard University and a founder and creative director of Parallel Film Collective, and is a founding partner of award-winning filmmaker Ava DuVernay's distribution company. Montre was awesome. Susan Jonas provided some incredible perspective, and she's a dramaturge, playwright, producer, scholar, and administrator, and brought in all sorts of parallels of where theater has been and where it's going with regard to gender equity, pay equity, and opportunity for women and persons of color. Dan Schoenbrunn was the one man on the panel, but he's a co-creator of an independent TV show called The Eye Slicer, and it features work of visionary directors. And so here is somebody who is operating in the digital realm, And that really changes access for everybody who's the creative to say, is this the place where I start? And Dan had some very thoughtful contributions. And then finally, a very impressive woman, Rachel Watanabe Batten, who's a producer and independent media strategist, and she's president of an organization called Contradiction and Struggle, which is an American production and consulting company. So these people think these deep thoughts. They think about this all day long. And so it was this mind-blowing hour of reveal and projection. And rather than just admiring or defining the issues of representation, of hiring, the whole talent pipeline, and whether or not there are, in fact, enough female writers and female producers and directors, no, there really are. And they've got tremendous experience. And the statistics show that after somebody creates their first short film, which, uses all of the skills that can transcend to TV, a lot of times after the initial exposure, because the barriers to access, the barriers to success are so high for women, they just walk away. So there is, in fact, a lot of experience out there, but it's not recognized because it's not nurtured. And then finally, poor box office performance. And that's something that we discussed as well, that they discussed. And the point being that they actively also connected the dots of what it takes for the audience and for the public at large to do things to make results. A lot of it involved discipline and focus on both a creator's part to hire persons of color or diverse backgrounds and to build connections to people who actually attend premieres and screenings, and how it's really incumbent on all of us to continue to be strong patrons of the arts. Because waiting for a film to get on Netflix is not the answer. So here's a bit from one point that Rachel made.
Following along, I'm Rachel Watanabe Batten. Yes. But following along the lines of your question about what can we do, I think one of the things is about criticism, right? Because obviously critics are what put people into the canon, right? Having these great reviews, being accepted at MoMA fourth night. There's in certain festivals are more prestigious than others. Who you're going to get to co-sign on you. All of this is part of wanting to be a part of the canon, even if you're rebelling against it, right? You want to, I'd like to reject that club after they offer me a membership, But I do think that there are more, like Melissa Silverstein herself has been a part of that with Women in Hollywood, and Shadow and Act has been a part of this breaking the canon, right? And I think that the role of critics and marketing and publicity cannot be, because it's great. We all are like, yeah, Black Panther and Hidden Figures and Wonder Woman, and if nobody did any marketing for those, you wouldn't know about them either. Right. And I think that part of it is recognizing that there is, in fact, a machine that goes behind all of this, right? There's a lot of wonderful films. And I've been part of, trying to help with so-called grassroots marketing, which I'm always like, you mean the audience? That is interested in films that may not be an easy fit for distribution companies who are, that all their people are white guys, right? Who are interested in the cool factor of certain things, but don't actually understand the cultural significance or know how something is going to play better in one theater or another, in part because they've never been to those neighborhoods. Whereas as a woman of color, I have to go to all those neighborhoods, right? I mean, I can come from Washington Heights or the Bronx or the Lower East Side, but I still go to Midtown to work.
Now, back in the day, the old tradition of Hollywood was that there was this very rigid separation of TV and film talent. You take the greatest stars of the silver screen back in its heyday, and it was very rare that they would come onto TV. They would come on to variety shows. They would be guests on talk shows, but they really weren't doing TV series. That was considered a step down. We have now come to a stronger understanding of the fact that talent comes in all forms and sometimes works its day job in different capacities, and that the messaging that all of these creators have together is what is creating this synergy, this shared moment, this consistent messaging across the platforms. So it was a new feature that the Athena Film Festival now awards excellence and progress recognition to the advertising world for certain creatives who are working on imagery and messaging for clients that is more reflective of the inclusive world that we all live in. That is totally logical. It just totally makes sense, because what these film festivals have now become is the gathering of the messengers, the creatives, the production experts, and the promotion innovators. So why shouldn't we recognize the fact that it isn't just in film that these messages and this promotion is so important, but it's in TV and it is in advertising, and some would say it's in podcasting. So the momentum of late feels like it's happening at a pretty steady pace. Big institutions, think about it, the big institutions are being pulled down by those who have come to realize that the abuse of power by those who hold it is so destructive. It is what's creating such a polarized society. The haves and the have-nots, the thems and the us's, the blues and the reds, the rurals and the urbans. And that's just on society's level. Then you take into account sexism and ageism, and it's a reminder that we must not live in silos, because none of these polarities exist in those silos. Advanced TV Herstory goes to great length to help us all think through and understand how cultural messages have become part of our mindset, and how TV has worked as a vehicle on those cultural messages, both positive and negative, and who some of the people were on the backside to make those messages transition through the feminist movement, through cultural changes, through how this country in particular has evolved in its thinking, and how that thinking is either reflected on TV or, in fact, the thinking drives what we see on TV. And the world is full of these real stories that sometimes get told by filmmakers, but it's by filmmakers who have dwelled in TV. The most important part being that we're talking about people of courage or integrity or grit. And I'm reminded that, having experienced the Athena Film Festival, that those stories will reach more listeners or audience members when we continue to break down media silos and tell them together. That's why you're listening to this podcast that normally talks about TV, but today chose to focus on film. And that's why I podcast. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams. Thanks so much for listening to Advanced TV Herstory. Here are a few notes that I've collected through the course of this episode to share with you. If you're looking for more information on the Athena Film Festival, go to athenafilmfestival.org and you will find a full lineup of the films that we screened, the panel discussions that were had, and a good list and biographical information of those who appeared on those panels. Great information. Also, if you are more interested in Mariska Hargitay's foundation, her nonprofit that she's established to further fight sexual violence and advocate for law enforcement policy changes, go to joyfulheartfoundation, altogether.org, joyfulheartfoundation.org. As always, find Advanced TV Herstory on Twitter at TV Herstory. Also, we're on Facebook, Advanced TV Herstory, a podcast. And finally, drop me a line, please. I like hearing from you guys. We're all in this together. So please drop me a line at advancedtvherstory, that's all one word, @gmail.com.